The wind coming off the Atlantic Ocean moves quietly through the tall beach grass along Ocean Parkway in Long Island, New York. Cars pass this narrow highway every day. To most drivers, it looks like nothing more than a quiet stretch of road between the mainland and the beach. But beneath that grass and sand, investigators would uncover one of the most disturbing serial murder mysteries in modern American history. For years, bodies were being hidden along this lonely highway. Victims who vanished without answers, families who waited for calls that never came, and a killer who believed he would never be found. This is the story of the Gilgo Beach serial killer. The mystery began with a disappearance that made almost no headlines. In May 2010, a 24-year-old woman named Shannon Gilbert traveled to Oak Beach, a gated community on Long Island. She worked as an escort and had arranged to meet a client late that night, but something went terribly wrong. Around 4:50 in the morning, Shannon dialed 911. The call lasted more than 20 minutes. Her voice was frantic, confused, terrified. She kept repeating the same chilling words. "Someone is trying to kill me." The dispatcher tried to calm her down, asking where she was and what was happening. But Shannon could not explain clearly. She ran from the house into the darkness of the neighborhood. Neighbors later reported seeing her knocking on doors, begging for help. But before anyone could stop her, she ran toward the marshland that stretched toward the beach. Then she disappeared. Police searched the area for days. They found nothing. No body, no suspect, just an unanswered disappearance that seemed impossible to explain. Months later, investigators returned to the area with cadaver dogs to continue the search. They hoped to find Shannon Gilbert. Instead, they uncovered something far more disturbing. In December 2010, a police officer and his dog were searching the brush along Ocean Parkway. Suddenly the dog stopped. It began sniffing the thick coastal vegetation and then started digging. Buried in the undergrowth were human remains wrapped tightly in burlap. The victim was later identified as Melissa Barthelemy. She had been missing since 2009, but what investigators discovered next turned a missing person case into a nightmare. 2 days later, while searching the same area, police discovered another set of remains. Then another, then another. Within a week, 4 bodies had been found. All young women, all wrapped in burlap, all left in the same isolated stretch of coastline. The media would soon call them the Gilgo Beach Four. The victims were Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, Amber Lynn Costello, and Maureen Brainerd Barnes. Each of them had something in common. They worked as escorts and used online classified sites to find clients. Each woman disappeared after arranging a meeting with someone they believed was a customer, and each of them ended up hidden in the same place. This was no coincidence. Someone had been hunting vulnerable women and carefully disposing of their bodies along Ocean Parkway. Investigators quickly realized something else. The killer knew this area extremely well. Ocean Parkway is dark at night, surrounded by marshland and thick vegetation. Drivers move quickly along the highway, rarely stopping. A person familiar with the area could easily hide bodies there without being noticed. For years, that meant the killer could be someone local, someone who had passed that road many times before. As the search expanded, the situation became even more disturbing. Police began exploring more sections of the coastline. What they discovered shocked even experienced investigators. More human remains began appearing. Some victims had been dismembered. Some body parts were discovered miles away from others. One set of bones belonged to a toddler. Another victim was an unidentified Asian male believed to have been wearing women's clothing. By the time the search ended, at least 10 sets of human remains had been discovered along the same highway. The quiet coastline had become a graveyard, and investigators faced an unsettling possibility. Not all of these victims may have been killed by the same person. There could be multiple killers connected to the area, or a single murderer who had been operating for decades. One detail in the case haunted investigators more than anything else. After Melissa Barthelemy disappeared, her family began receiving phone calls. The calls were made from Melissa's cell phone. But Melissa was already dead. The person calling was the killer. He contacted Melissa's younger sister several times. His voice sounded calm and controlled, almost amused. During the calls, he mocked the family and told them Melissa was dead. Each call lasted less than a minute. Investigators later discovered that the calls were being made from crowded locations in Manhattan, busy areas filled with thousands of people. This meant the killer was confident enough to taunt the victim's family while moving freely through one of the busy cities in the world. He knew exactly how to avoid being caught, and for years he succeeded. Because despite the growing number of victims and national media attention, the identity of the Gilgo Beach killer remained a mystery. A predator had been hiding in plain sight, living an ordinary life, working a normal job, passing strangers on the street every day, all while keeping one of the darkest secrets in modern criminal history. But more than a decade later, a breakthrough would finally expose the man investigators had been searching for. And the truth behind the Gilgo Beach murders would shock the entire country. Continue watching to see how detectives finally uncovered the identity of the Gilgo Beach serial killer. For more than a decade, the Gilgo Beach murders remained one of the most frustrating unsolved serial killer cases in America. Investigators had bodies, they had crime scenes. They even had some digital clues, but they had no name. And without a suspect, the investigation slowly began to stall. Behind the scenes, the case also faced serious internal problems. The Suffolk County Police Department was dealing with leadership scandals and accusations of corruption that distracted investigators and slowed progress on the Gilgo Beach murders. Public pressure grew. Families of the victims demanded answers. But year after year, the case seemed frozen in time. Then something changed. In 2022, a new task force was formed to re-examine the entire investigation. This group included local detectives, state investigators, and federal agents. Instead of starting from the beginning, they focused on something many earlier investigators had overlooked: digital evidence. One victim in particular became central to the renewed investigation: Amber Lynn Costello. Costello disappeared in September 2010 after arranging a meeting with a client through online classified ads. Witnesses later described seeing her leave her home with a man driving a dark-colored pickup truck. That small detail would become extremely important years later. When investigators revisited the case files, they began examining old phone records connected to the victims. Several of the women had been contacted by the same series of burner phones before they disappeared. The phones were anonymous prepaid devices, but they still left behind small digital footprints, cell towers, call patterns, location data. Investigators began mapping where those phones had been used. One location appeared again and again: Midtown Manhattan, specifically near an office building where an architecture firm operated. That discovery led detectives to a man named Rex Heuermann. Heuermann was a 59-year-old architect who lived in Massapequa Park on Long Island. At first glance, he appeared completely ordinary. He was married. He had children. He ran a professional architecture business in Manhattan. Nothing about his public life suggested he could be connected to serial murder, but investigators began digging deeper. They discovered that Heuermann owned a dark green Chevrolet Avalanche pickup truck, the same type of vehicle witnesses had described the night Amber Costello disappeared. That connection immediately raised red flags. Detectives quietly began surveilling him. They reviewed years of phone records connected to the burner phones used to contact victims. Some of those phones had been active near Heuermann's home. Others were used near his office. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. But investigators still needed stronger proof. The breakthrough came from something surprisingly simple: pizza. During surveillance, detectives observed Heuermann throwing away a partially eaten pizza crust. They collected the discarded crust and sent it for DNA testing. The results were shocking. The DNA matched genetic material recovered from evidence connected to the Gilgo Beach victims. Investigators also discovered hair evidence linking Heuermann's household to several victims. Further digital analysis revealed disturbing internet searches connected to his devices. Searches about the Gilgo Beach investigation. Searches for information about the victims themselves. Searches asking whether police had identified suspects in the case. The evidence was building into a devastating picture. For more than a decade, the man responsible for some of the most notorious murders in New York had been living a normal suburban life. Going to work, talking to neighbors, blending into everyday society. All while investigators searched desperately for the killer. In July 2023, police finally moved in. Rex Heuermann was arrested in Manhattan while walking near his office. The news shocked the entire country. A quiet architect from Long Island was now accused of being the Gilgo Beach serial killer. He was charged with multiple murders connected to the Gilgo Beach victims. But even after the arrest, many questions remain. Investigators believe there may be additional victims connected to the case. Some of the remains discovered along Ocean Parkway have still not been definitively linked to Heuermann, and the timeline of the murders stretches across many years, which raises a disturbing possibility. The Gilgo Beach killings may represent only part of the story. If there were more victims, they may still be waiting to be discovered. The quiet coastline along Ocean Parkway still holds secrets beneath its sand and marshland. Secrets that investigators are still trying to uncover. The Gilgo Beach case is no longer a mystery about whether a serial killer existed. Now the question is how many lives were truly lost before the killer was finally exposed, and whether the full truth has yet been revealed.